The wind howled through the skeletal branches of Blackthorn Ridge, a jagged scar of land in northern Montana, where the sky seemed to press down like a bruise. The air carried a metallic tang, as if the earth itself bled iron. At the edge of the ridge stood a weathered farmhouse, its clapboard siding peeling like old skin, windows dark as empty sockets. This was the home of Clara Hensley, a 34-year-old widow who had fled the city's clamor after her husband's death, seeking solace in the silence of this forgotten place. She'd bought the house site unseen, drawn by its isolation and the promise of a fresh start. The locals in the nearby town of Coldwater, population 312, called it the Witch's Hollow, though they never explained why. Clara dismissed their whispers as small-town superstition, the kind that clung to old houses like cobwebs. The farmhouse sat on 15 acres of untamed land, bordered by dense pine forests that seemed to swallow light. A dirt road, barely wide enough for her pickup truck, snaked through the trees to connect the property to Coldwater. The house itself was a relic, built in 1897, with creaking oak floors, a stone fireplace that belched smoke, and a cellar accessible only by a rusted trapdoor in the kitchen. Clara liked its quirks, the way it groaned under the wind's weight, as if it had stories to tell. She spent her first week unpacking her few belongings: a suitcase of clothes, a box of books, and a worn leather journal where she scribbled her thoughts. She'd been a librarian in Boise, but now she worked remotely, editing manuscripts for a small press, her laptop tethered to a finicky satellite connection. The first few days were peaceful. Clara fell into a rhythm, mornings spent sipping coffee on the sagging porch, afternoons lost in work, evenings reading by the fire. The silence was profound, broken only by the chatter of birds or the distant bark of a coyote. She felt the weight of her grief lifting, her husband's absence less like a wound and more like a shadow. But on the 9th night, something changed. It was just past midnight when Clara woke to a sound she couldn't place. Not the wind, not the house settling, but a low, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails drumming on glass. She lay still, heart thudding, straining to locate the source. The sound came from downstairs, faint but deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, then again. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold against the floorboards, and grabbed the flashlight from her nightstand. Her husband's old hunting knife, a keepsake she'd kept more for sentiment than protection, rested in the drawer. She hesitated, then took it, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. Downstairs, the house was a maze of shadows. The tapping had stopped, leaving a silence so thick it felt alive. Clara swept the flashlight across the living room, the beam catching the glint of a brass lamp, the dull sheen of the fireplace. Nothing moved. She checked the windows, all locked, the latches rusted from disuse. The front door was bolted, the back door secure. The kitchen was empty, the trapdoor to the cellar undisturbed. She stood there, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, feeling foolish. Maybe it was a branch against a window, or mice in the walls. Old houses made noises, didn't they? But the next night, it happened again. This time, the tapping was louder, more insistent, coming from the back door. Clara didn't move at first, hoping it would stop. It didn't. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause, followed by a slow, deliberate scrape, like something dragging across the wood. She crept downstairs, knife clutched tightly, and peered through the door's small window. The porch was empty, bathed in moonlight, the forest beyond a wall of black. She flicked on the exterior light, but it revealed nothing. No footprints, no disturbed earth. Just the wind, keening through the pines. By the third night, Clara was exhausted, her nerves frayed from lack of sleep. The tapping returned, now from the living room window. She stayed in bed, covers pulled to her chin, telling herself it was nothing. But then she heard something new. A voice, low and muffled, like someone murmuring just outside. She couldn't make out the words, only the cadence, rising and falling like a chant. Her skin prickled. She grabbed her phone, but the signal was dead, as it often was out here. The voice stopped abruptly, replaced by the tapping, now at the front door. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. Clara called the sheriff's office the next morning. Deputy Amos Reed, a grizzled man in his late 50s with a face like cracked leather, arrived an hour later. He listened to her story, his expression unreadable, then walked the property, his boots crunching on the frostbitten grass. He found no signs of trespassing, no tracks, no broken branches, no scratches on the doors or windows. Could be kids from town, messing with the new girl, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Or maybe it's the house. Folks say it's got a history. When Clara pressed him, he shrugged. Just stories. Keep your doors locked and call if it happens again. That night, Clara dragged a chair to the front door and sat with the knife in her lap, the flashlight by her side. She didn't sleep. At 12:47 a.m., the tapping started, this time from the cellar trapdoor. Her breath caught. The sound was unmistakable, slow, deliberate, echoing in the hollow space below. Tap, tap, tap. She stared at the trapdoor, its rusted hinges glinting in the dim light. The knife trembled in her hand. She wanted to check, to prove it was nothing, but her legs wouldn't move. The tapping stopped after a minute, but the silence was worse, heavy with anticipation. The next day, Clara forced herself to open the trapdoor. The cellar was a damp, earthen chamber, its walls lined with sagging shelves holding jars of preserves long past edible. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something sharper, like old blood. She found nothing out of place. No footprints in the dirt, no signs of disturbance. But on one shelf, half hidden behind a jar, was a small wooden box, its lid carved with strange angular symbols. Inside was a bundle of yellowed papers tied with twine and a single iron key, heavy and cold to the touch. The papers were letters, written in a spidery hand, dated from 1901 to 1913. They were addressed to someone named Eliza, signed by a man named Jonah Hensley, Clara's great-great-grandfather. She realized the original owner of the house. The letters spoke of love, then fear, then desperation. Jonah wrote of the hollow whispers, sounds that came at night, tapping and murmuring, driving him to madness. He believed the land was cursed, that something lived in the ridge, watching, waiting. The final letter, dated March 1913, ended mid-sentence. Eliza, I cannot bear it any longer. The key is hidden, but it must never. Clara's hands shook as she read. She called Deputy Reed again, showing him the letters. He frowned, his fingers tracing the faded ink. I heard about Jonah Hensley, he said. Folks said he went mad, disappeared one spring. His wife, Eliza, stayed on, but she was never the same. Died a few years later. Alone. He handed the letters back. I'd leave this alone, Miss Hensley. Some things are better left buried. But Clara couldn't let it go. The tapping continued, always at night, always from a different place. Windows, doors, the cellar, even the attic once, but she found nothing but dust and cobwebs. The voice returned, clearer now, whispering her name, Clara Ha. She began to doubt her sanity. Was she imagining it, like Jonah had? Or was someone, or something, real, taunting her? She started researching the ridge's history, driving to Coldwater's tiny library to pore over old records. She found mentions of Blackthorn Ridge dating back to the 1800s, always tied to disappearances. Hunters, settlers, even children, vanishing without a trace. The locals blamed the Hollow, a vague entity they refused to define. One article from 1927 described a man named Thomas Carver, a drifter arrested for trespassing near the Hensley house. He'd been found with a key matching the one Clara found, babbling about opening the Hollow. He escaped custody and was never seen again. Clara's fear grew, but so did her determination. She bought a shotgun from a hardware store in Coldwater, learning to load it with trembling hands. She installed motion sensor lights around the house, but they never triggered, even when the tapping came. She tried to leave once, packing her truck and driving toward town, but the road seemed to twist, the trees closing in, until she found herself back at the farmhouse, dizzy and disoriented. It was as if the ridge wouldn't let her go. One night, the tapping didn't come. Instead, at exactly 12:47 a.m., the front door creaked open. Clara hadn't unlocked it. She was sure of it. She grabbed the shotgun, her pulse roaring in her ears, and crept downstairs. The door hung ajar, moonlight spilling across the floor. Outside, the forest was silent, the air unnaturally still. She stepped onto the porch, shotgun raised, and saw him. A man, standing at the edge of the trees, dressed in black, his face pale as bone. He didn't move, just stared, his eyes glinting like whetstones. Clara shouted, "Who are you?" Her voice cracked. The man tilted his head, as if curious, then raised a hand, pointing at the ground. She looked down and saw the iron key, lying at her feet. She hadn't brought it outside. It had been in the box upstairs. Her stomach lurched. When she looked up, the man was gone, but she heard his voice, clear and cold, from the trees. "Open it!" She ran inside, slamming the door, her hands shaking as she bolted it. The key lay where she'd left it, gleaming in the moonlight. She didn't sleep that night. Sitting by the fire, with the shotgun across her lap, the key burning a hole in her pocket. At dawn, she drove to Coldwater and found Deputy Reed at the sheriff's office. She told him everything, the man, the key, the voice. He listened, his face pale, then took her to the back room, where he unlocked a filing cabinet. Inside was a folder labeled Blackthorn Ridge Incidents. It contained reports dating back decades. Trespasses, disappearances, all linked to the ridge. One photo, grainy and faded, showed a man in black, his face blurred, standing near the Hensley house. It was dated 1913, the year Jonah vanished. "Every few years, someone sees him," Reed said. "Always in spring, always near your house. We never catch him. He's not normal." He closed the folder. "I'm telling you, Clara, leave. Sell the place. Don't go back." But Clara couldn't leave. The ridge had her in its grip, and she knew it. She returned to the farmhouse, determined to end it. That night, she sat in the kitchen, the shotgun beside her, the key on the table. At 12:47 a.m., the tapping started. Not from outside, but from the trapdoor. Tap, tap, tap. Then the voice. louder now, chanting her name. She stood, heart pounding, and lifted the trapdoor. The cellar was dark, but at its far end, where there should have been only a dirt wall, was a door. Wooden, ancient, carved with the same symbols as the box. The key fit its lock perfectly. Clara hesitated, her breath shallow. The voice grew louder, insistent. "Open it!" She turned the key, and the door swung inward, revealing a tunnel, its walls slick with moisture, descending into the earth. A cold wind rushed up, carrying the smell of decay. She stepped inside, shotgun in hand, the flashlight beam trembling. The tunnel twisted downward, its walls etched with symbols that seemed to pulse in the light. She walked for what felt like hours, the air growing colder, the silence absolute. At the tunnel's end was a chamber, vast and domed, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood an altar, carved from black stone, stained with something dark. On it lay a figure, the man in black, his face pale, his eyes open and unblinking. He smiled, a slow, predatory grin. "You opened it," he said, his voice echoing in her skull. "Now you're home." Clara raised the shotgun, but her arms felt heavy, her vision blurring. The man stood, moving with unnatural grace, and reached for her. She fired, the blast deafening. But he didn't flinch. The chamber shook, dust raining from above, and she ran back through the tunnel, her lungs burning. The door was still open, but as she reached it, she felt a hand on her shoulder, cold as ice. She screamed, wrenching free, and slammed the door, locking it with the key. She stumbled upstairs, the house shaking around her, windows rattling, the wind howling like a living thing. She threw the key into the fireplace, watching it melt, the flames flaring green. The tapping stopped. The voice fell silent. The house was still. Clara left the next morning, driving to Boise without looking back. She sold the farmhouse through a realtor, never disclosing what she'd seen. The new owners, a young couple from California, moved in that summer. They lasted 3 weeks before leaving, claiming the house was wrong. The property has changed hands twice since, each owner staying shorter than the last. The locals still call it the Witch's Hollow, and on spring nights, they say, you can hear tapping in the woods, faint but deliberate, waiting for someone to open the door. Clara lives in a small apartment now, far from Blackthorn Ridge. She doesn't sleep well, waking at 12:47 a.m. to the sound of tapping, faint and far away. She tells herself it's the pipes or the neighbors, but she keeps a knife by her bed, just in case.